The Great Council chamber floated in space like a crystal monument to order and civilization. Inside its walls, representatives from 400 different species gathered to debate and decide the fate of countless worlds. They had done this for 12,000 years, building a system of laws and traditions that governed most of the known galaxy. But there was one seat that had remained empty for a very long time. It was the seat reserved for Earth, and it had been waiting for exactly 100 years. Commander Jacob Hayes stood at the window of his ship and watched the massive station turn slowly against the stars. He had seen this view many times before, and each time the Council sent another invitation. His second officer, Karen Miller, walked up behind him with a datapad in her hands. She looked tired, like someone who had received the same message too many times to count. She told him the Council wanted humanity to apply for membership again. Jacob did not turn around. He asked what the terms were this time. Karen read from the pad with a voice that carried frustration in every word. The Council wanted humans to disarm most of their fleet. They wanted to send inspectors into human territory whenever they pleased. They wanted humans to ask permission before developing new technology. They wanted humanity to accept a lower status for 50 years. Most importantly, they wanted humans to stop exploring space beyond the areas the Council had approved. Jacob smiled, but there was no humor in it. He said the Council wanted humanity to give up everything that made them who they were. They wanted humans to surrender their independence, their curiosity, and their right to protect themselves. The Galactic Council had discovered humanity 30 years earlier, when human ships first ventured beyond their own solar system. The Council had been surprised to find another intelligent species, then dismissive of their primitive technology, and finally worried about their rapid progress. Humanity had gone from basic rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than 200 years. Every other species had taken thousands of years to make the same journey. The Council saw this speed as dangerous and unpredictable. They offered humanity a place at their table, but only if humans agreed to slow down and follow Council rules. Humanity had said no, and they kept saying no for 3 decades. Lisa Monroe joined them at the window. She was the ship's chief scientist, and she brought news from their latest mission. She told them that human explorers had discovered 3 more systems suitable for colonies in the outer regions. That brought the total to 15 new colonies in just 10 years. Karen observed that the Council probably thought humans were expanding too quickly and being reckless about it. Jacob corrected her and said the Council was afraid. Every other species had needed the Council's guidance and permission to grow. Humanity was proving that species could thrive without the Council's approval, and that terrified the old powers. On the Nexus station, Ambassador Vrel addressed the assembled Council members. His species had been part of the Council for 6,000 years, and he spoke with the confidence of someone who believed his way was the only way. He announced that humans continued to ignore every attempt at communication. They were expanding without oversight, building weapons the Council had not approved, and making contact with other species without asking permission first. This could not be allowed to continue. Many in the chamber agreed with him. The empty seat seemed to mock them all, a constant reminder that they had failed to bring the young species under control. Another ambassador named Thera suggested economic sanctions and trade restrictions. But someone pointed out that humans mostly traded among themselves and with independent systems that did not care about Council approval. The Council's sanctions would mean nothing. Vrel grew more frustrated. He declared that they must make humanity understand the consequences of standing alone. No species could survive isolation from the rest of the galaxy. But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from Council intelligence networks. Human ships were everywhere, exploring regions the Council considered too dangerous or not worth the effort. Human diplomats were making deals with minor species the Council had ignored. Human technology was advancing at a rate that made the Council's own scientists nervous. Back on Earth, the planetary government was holding another debate about the Council's offer. Secretary General Paul Wright stood before the Assembly and asked the same question that had been asked 100 times before. Should humanity accept the Council's terms and join their system? Director Catherine Ross stood up to speak. She ran the Space Defense Force, and she did not mince words. She said the Council offered protection that humans did not need, and restrictions that humans would never accept. Humanity had defended itself against pirates and territorial disputes without any help. Why would they give up their freedom now? Senator George Palmer argued that isolation had costs too. Humanity could benefit from Council knowledge, technology, and trade routes. Catherine shot back and asked at what price. She pointed out that the Council wanted to inspect human ships, weapons, and research facilities. They wanted to tell humans where they could and could not go. That was not membership. That was surrender. Paul Wright called for order and reminded everyone that the vote had been clear for 30 years. Humanity would not beg for acceptance. They would not trade their freedom for the appearance of security. The Council's seat remained empty not because humans were denied entry, but because they refused to pay the price of admission. The assembly erupted in applause. Jacob Hayes received a message from Earth Command. He read it and smiled before turning to Karen. He told her to set a course for the frontier regions. They had 3 new star systems to survey. Karen reminded him that the Council had declared that area restricted space. Jacob replied that the Council did not own the galaxy. Neither did humanity. But humans had just as much right to explore as anyone else. Maybe more right, because they were willing to take risks that the Council would never accept. As his ship engaged its faster-than-light drive and left the station behind, the message was clear. Earth's seat was empty because humanity had chosen to stand on their own rather than kneel before others. The galaxy was starting to notice, and everything was about to change. 3 months had passed since Jacob's ship left the station, and tensions were getting worse. The breaking point came when a cargo ship called Meridian Dawn ran into trouble. Captain Ryan Foster was hauling metals and manufactured goods from a human colony to an independent trading station. The route was well known and passed through what humanity considered neutral territory. The Galactic Council thought differently. A Council warship called Righteous Clarity appeared on Ryan's scanners and sent a transmission. The voice told him he was violating Council transit protocols and ordered him to cut his engines. Ryan looked at his navigator Michelle Carter with confusion. He said they were in open space, where the Council had no authority. Michelle checked her systems and confirmed they were on a registered commercial route through neutral territory. Ryan opened a communication channel and explained that his ship was not subject to Council rules in this area. The Council ship responded with a cold voice. It claimed that all space within 10 light-years of Council systems was now under Council authority. Ryan had to comply or face consequences. Ryan felt anger rising in his chest. The Council was changing the rules without warning and testing how far they could push humanity. He told Michelle to send an urgent message to Earth Command, then prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers. Michelle pointed out that they were a cargo ship facing 4 military frigates. Ryan knew exactly what they were up against, but he was not going to surrender just because the Council decided to redraw borders without permission. He spoke to his entire crew over the intercom. He warned them they might have company soon and told everyone to secure the cargo. The Righteous Clarity moved to intercept, while its escort ships spread out in an attack formation. Ryan had been flying cargo through dangerous space for 15 years and knew every trick. He told Michelle to push the engines to maximum power and route all available energy to the drives. They were going to make a run for the safety of the independent station. The Meridian Dawn surged forward faster than the Council ships expected. Plasma bolts streaked past them, close enough to make the point clear but not close enough to hit. Michelle said they were going to open fire. Ryan gripped his chair and told her to let them shoot. Every weapon discharge against an unarmed cargo ship would be recorded and broadcast across every human channel and independent network in the sector. If the Council wanted to be seen as civilized peacekeepers, they could explain why they were shooting at freighters. The Council ships closed in and charged their weapons for a disabling shot. Before they could fire, 3 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, with their weapons already active. Captain Diane Porter commanded the lead ship and sent a message to the Council vessels. She told them to stand down immediately because they were threatening a civilian ship in neutral space. The Council commander responded with contempt. He said this was a council enforcement action, and they did not recognize human military authority. Diane's voice carried absolute conviction when she replied. She told them to consider this simple fact. If they fired on that cargo ship, humanity would treat it as an act of war. The choice was theirs. The void became silent except for the hum of charging weapons. The Council had more ships, but the human warships were newer, faster, and carried weapons the Council had never seen in actual combat. The standoff lasted several long minutes until the Council commander received new orders from the station. He transmitted that they would file a formal protest, and this incident would not be forgotten. Diane replied that neither would the Council's attempt to claim neutral space as their own territory. The Council ships withdrew, but the damage was already done. Within hours, footage of the confrontation spread everywhere. It showed a civilian cargo ship being threatened by military vessels and saved only by the quick response of human forces. Independent systems and minor species watched and took note. On the Nexus station, the Council held an emergency meeting. Ambassador Vrel was furious. He declared that humans had defied lawful enforcement and brought warships into the situation. They were threatening the very order the Council had maintained for thousands of years. Ambassador Thera raised a concern. She pointed out that humans claimed the space was neutral, and the Council's own old charts supported this claim. The Council had changed the designation only last month. Vrel insisted they had the authority to make such changes whenever necessary. Another ambassador named Corin asked if they really had that authority. He explained that the Council had power over member species because those species granted it. Humanity had never granted the Council anything. The Council kept acting like humans were subjects who had forgotten their place, but humans had never been subjects to begin with. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some demanded stronger action against humanity, while others urged caution. Back on Earth, Secretary General Paul Wright met with his security advisors. Director Catherine Ross explained the situation with her usual bluntness. The Council was testing humanity's limits, and the incident was deliberate. They wanted to see if humans would back down when pushed. Humanity had not backed down, so the Council would push harder next time. Paul asked what options they had. Catherine said they could continue defending their interests and refusing to submit, dealing with each crisis as it came, or they could force the issue and make it clear once and for all that humanity would not play by Council rules. General Nathan Clark suggested that if conflict came, humanity was ready. Their ships were better in most categories, and their people were more adaptable. Paul interrupted and said there would be no war if they were smart about this. The Council talked about civilization and order, but what they really wanted was control. They were used to species that needed them. Humanity needed to show everyone that there was another way to thrive. Catherine asked how they would accomplish that. Paul smiled without warmth. He said humanity would do what it always did. They would explore new regions, expand their colonies, make alliances with species the Council had overlooked, and demonstrate that freedom worked just as well as 1,000 regulations. They would make the empty seat in the Council chamber a symbol not of exclusion but of irrelevance. Admiral Helen Bradford had been listening quietly. She pointed out that the Council had resources humanity could not match in direct confrontation. But the Council was bureaucratic and slow to adapt. If humanity moved fast enough, made enough allies, and showed enough strength, the Council would have to accept humans on their terms or admit they could not control them. Either way, humanity would win. The message went out across all human space. There would be no submission and no surrender. Humanity would forge its own path. Among the stars, and the galaxy would have to adjust. The Council had wanted humanity to beg for acceptance, but instead, they got defiance. In the empty seat of the Council chamber, that defiance echoed louder than any words. 6 months after the incident with the cargo ship, the galaxy had changed in ways the Council never expected. Humanity's refusal to submit had not isolated them. Instead, it had started something the Council had not seen in thousands of years. It had started a movement. Ambassador Corin sat in his private room on the station and reviewed reports from his sources. What he read both troubled him and gave him hope. He sent a private message to Lisa Monroe, asking to meet urgently. The matter concerned more than just their two species. Lisa received the message at the human research station where she worked. Her security chief, Ben Carter, warned that the meeting could be a trap. Lisa acknowledged the risk, but pointed out that Corinne had never been hostile to humanity. He had publicly questioned the council's approach. She decided to go. 3 days later, they met at a neutral trading station run by independent merchants. Corin was tall, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. His large, dark eyes looked at her with curiosity. He thanked her for coming and said the meeting carried risks for both of them. Lisa agreed and said the council would not approve of their conversation. Corin activated a privacy field and said he would be direct. The council was fracturing, and humanity was the reason. Lisa sat down and listened carefully. Corin explained that 47 species sat on the council, but only 12 truly held power. The rest were junior members with limited influence. For thousands of years they had accepted this arrangement because they had no other choice. The council provided stability, protection, and access to technology. But humanity had shown them something dangerous. Lisa understood immediately. She said humanity had shown them the council was optional. Corin agreed. He explained that humanity had thrived without council approval. They had defended themselves without council fleets. They had explored dangerous regions and found wealth there. Most dangerously, they had done all of this while maintaining their freedom. 17 junior member species had quietly contacted the human government. They wanted to know how humanity did it. They wanted to know if they could follow the same path. Lisa felt her heart beat faster. She asked if the council knew about this. Corin said some council members suspected, and the senior members were getting paranoid. There was talk of making an example of humanity to demonstrate the cost of defiance. But Corin also saw opportunity. If enough species stood together, the council's power structure would collapse. A new order could emerge based on real cooperation, instead of hierarchy. Lisa said what he was describing sounded like revolution. Corin corrected her and said it was evolution. The council had served its purpose for thousands of years, but it had become rigid and corrupt. It protected the powerful and exploited the weak. Humanity's refusal to join was not rebellion. It was a mirror showing everyone else what they had been accepting. Lisa asked what he wanted from humanity. Corin said he wanted nothing they were not already doing. He asked them to continue being free, making their alliances, and showing the galaxy there was another way. When the time came, they should stand with those who would stand with them. The meeting ended without formal agreements, but both understood something important had changed. Lisa reported back to Earth Command, and within weeks, quiet diplomatic channels opened between humanity and dozens of smaller species. Meanwhile, Jacob Hayes and his crew had made a discovery that would complicate everything. In an unexplored sector, they encountered a species called the Colleen, who had been hiding from the galaxy for 300 years. Elder Mara led the Colleen refuge fleet. Her people had bronze skin with luminous markings that pulsed with emotion. She explained that the council had found them during an expansion period centuries ago. The council offered membership, but the terms were unacceptable. They wanted to relocate the Colleen population because their home world was in a location the council wanted for strategic purposes. The Colleen refused. The council said they were being irrational and did not understand galactic politics. So the Colleen took their ships and disappeared into deep space. For 3 centuries they had lived as nomads, always moving and always hiding. Then they detected Jacob's vessel. They almost ran again, but they intercepted human communications. They heard humans mention the council with defiance instead of submission. They had to know if they heard correctly. Jacob smiled and confirmed they heard right. Humanity did not bow to the council. They charted their own course. Mara said quietly that perhaps they were not alone after all. The Colleen had knowledge of regions the council never explored. They had technology developed in isolation. They had a burning desire to stop running. If humanity would accept them as allies, they could offer much. Jacob replied that the galaxy was big enough for everyone, and friends were always welcome. The alliance was formalized within a month. The Colleen shared star charts, revealing dozens of habitable systems and resource-rich regions. In exchange, humanity offered protection, trade, and the promise that the Kaleen would never have to hide again. News spread quickly, and the Council was furious. Humanity had contacted a species beyond Council space, without authorization, and formed an alliance without Council mediation. Ambassador Vrel demanded sanctions. But the junior Council members were paying attention. If humanity could protect the Kaleen, could they offer the same protection to others? Species that had been bullied or exploited by the senior Council members began to wonder. Captain Diane Porter hosted a secret delegation from a junior Council member that controlled important trade routes but had little political power. The representative explained that his people were tired of being told what to do. The senior members took their resources, used their territory, and gave them nothing but scraps in return. They had watched humanity refuse this treatment and prosper. They wanted the same. Diane warned that leaving the Council was a big step. The Council would not let them go easily. The representative said they knew the risks. But if they stood together with humanity, the Kaleen, and others who thought the same way, the Council could not crush them all. They were not asking for protection. They were asking for partnership. Diane sent the proposal to Earth Command. Within days, Paul Wright addressed the government. He said humanity had set out to maintain independence. They never expected to start a movement. But the galaxy was watching, and they saw an alternative to Council control. Humanity could turn its back on these people and let them face the Council alone, or they could stand with them. He said humanity should stand. The vote was unanimous. Over the next 3 months, a new organization formed called the Coalition of Independent Systems. It started with humanity, the Kaleen, and one former Council member. Within weeks, 6 more species joined. Some left the Council, while others had never been members. They were small, scattered, and individually weak, but together they represented a challenge to the old order that could not be ignored. Ambassador Vrel addressed the Council in rage. He declared this was rebellion and chaos. The humans were destroying everything the Council had built. But Corin rose to respond with a voice that carried moral authority. He said, perhaps what the Council had built deserved to be destroyed. Perhaps humans were not enemies, but teachers. They had shown that freedom and cooperation could coexist. That strength did not require submission. The question was not how to punish humanity, but whether the Council had wisdom to learn from them. The chamber erupted in arguments, but the lines were clear. The old order was crumbling and something new was being born. Earth's seat was still empty, but humanity was no longer alone. The formation of the Coalition of Independent Systems sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. What started as humanity's stubborn refusal had become a real political alternative. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Council's authority was being questioned openly. Not by primitives or criminals, but by civilized species who simply chose a different path. Ambassador Vrel had reached his limit. In a closed meeting of the Council's inner circle, he presented his plan. The 12 most powerful species controlled galactic politics, and Vrel spoke to them with barely controlled fury. He said they had tried diplomacy, economic pressure, and intimidation. None of it worked. Humans continued expanding, and worse, they inspired others to follow. The Council had to act decisively before this infection spread further. High Chancellor Drex asked what he was proposing. Vrel explained his plan for a blockade. They would surround human space with Council fleets. Nothing would get in or out. They would strangle the human economy, isolate their colonies, and make it clear to everyone that defying the Council had consequences. When human civilians started suffering and colonies started begging for relief, The human government would have no choice but to accept council terms. Ambassador Thera had been growing uncomfortable with the council's aggressive approach. She pointed out that a blockade was an act of war. If they did this, they would cross a line they could never uncross. Vrel snapped that they had already crossed that line. The coalition was a direct threat to council authority. Every day it existed, more species questioned whether they needed the council. They had to crush this rebellion now, or watch their entire civilization collapse into chaos. The debate lasted hours, but fear won over wisdom. The council voted to implement the blockade. 50 warships from multiple species would form a barrier around human space. The official reason was security concerns about unauthorized weapons development. But everyone knew the truth. The council was drawing a line in the stars. Ben Carter detected the council fleet movements first. From his position on a human defense station at the edge of their territory, his sensors picked up massive ship deployments. He reported that multiple council fleet groups were converging on human borders. This was not a patrol. This was an invasion force. Admiral Helen Bradford reviewed the data from Earth Command. She said grimly that the council was not invading. They were surrounding humanity. It was a blockade. Paul Wright joined the discussion through a communication link. He asked if they could break through. Helen said possibly. But it would mean open warfare. The council had numbers on their side. Humanity had better technology and training. But in a long conflict, the outcome was uncertain. Paul understood the situation. The council thought they could starve humanity into submission. Cut them off until they begged for mercy. Helen confirmed that was the plan. The question was how to respond. Director Catherine Ross had been working on that question. She explained that humanity had assets the council did not know about. Deep space supply caches, hidden routes through regions the council considered too dangerous, support from coalition allies. They could sustain their colonies for at least a year, maybe longer. Paul pointed out that coalition species were scattered and weak. If the council was willing to blockade humanity, they would not hesitate to pressure human allies. Catherine said they needed to make the blockade costly for the council, not militarily but politically. The council's power rested on the idea they were civilized peacekeepers. Humanity needed to expose the blockade as bullying on a galactic scale. Captain Ryan Foster was given a mission to test the blockade. His new ship was a fast courier, designed for exactly this work. His orders were simple: run the blockade, document any hostile actions, and get the footage to every independent network in the galaxy. Admiral Bradford told him before departure to remember that the council expected aggression. He should give them professionalism instead. Be polite, be respectful, and make them look like the villains they were. Ryan approached the blockade, broadcasting on all frequencies. He identified himself as captain of a civilian vessel carrying medical supplies to a human colony. He requested clearance to proceed. The response came from a council battlecruiser. They denied his request. All traffic into and out of human space was prohibited until further notice. Ryan asked calmly, on whose authority? The voice replied by order of the Galactic Council. Ryan kept his voice professional, but every word was being recorded and broadcast. He asked if the council was aware that the colony had 3,000 civilians, including children who required these supplies. This was a humanitarian shipment. The voice said all shipments were prohibited. He should turn back or face interdiction. Ryan held his position. He wanted to be absolutely clear. They were preventing medical supplies from reaching civilians. That was what was happening. He wanted them to confirm it for the record. There was a pause. The council commander had not expected to be challenged so directly. He repeated that the blockade was a lawful enforcement action. Ryan pressed the issue. Against civilians who needed medicine. Yes or no? Were they preventing these supplies from reaching people who needed them? The silence stretched. Finally, the voice told him to turn back. This was his final warning. Ryan turned his ship around, but the damage was done. The footage spread across every independent news network, every trade hub. every diplomatic channel. The mighty Galactic Council was stopping medicine from reaching children. The backlash was immediate. Independent systems that had been neutral began condemning the blockade. Even some council members expressed discomfort with the tactics. Most importantly, the junior council members started to rebel. Ambassador Corin led the charge. He declared that this was not justice or peacekeeping. This was collective punishment of civilians for wanting to be free. If this was what the council had become, then the council had lost its way. 17 junior members walked out of a council session in protest. It was not enough to break the blockade, but it shook the council's political foundation. Meanwhile, humanity was adapting. Smuggler routes through dangerous space became supply lines. Independent traders who sympathized with the coalition ran the blockade at night, using human stealth technology. The Colleen guided entire convoys through regions the council did not even know existed. The blockade was failing, but the council had committed too deeply to back down. 3 months into the standoff, Jacob Hayes made a discovery that would change everything. Deep in unexplored space, his ship detected a massive energy signature. Following it led to an impossible sight. A derelict structure of enormous size drifted in the void. Lisa Monroe analyzed the data, and her voice carried wonder. It was a shipyard, an automated shipyard from a civilization that predated the council by thousands of years. Jacob asked if they could activate it. Lisa said maybe. The systems were dormant, but intact. If they could reverse engineer the controls, this thing could build ships. Lots of ships. Fast. Jacob understood the implications immediately. If they could get this shipyard working, the entire strategic situation would change. The council thought they had humanity trapped. It was time to show them what happened when you cornered humanity. The information reached Earth within 2 weeks. Engineering teams were sent immediately, and what they found exceeded all hopes. The ancient shipyard was functional, and its construction methods were compatible with human technology. Within 4 months, the shipyard was producing vessels. Not just any vessels, but warships that combined human innovation with ancient alien engineering. Ships that were faster, stronger, and more powerful than anything in current use. Admiral Bradford reviewed the projections and smiled for the first time in months. The council wanted to test humanity's resolve. They wanted to see if humans would break. Instead, humanity was about to become stronger than ever. Paul Wright addressed the human government and broadcast to the entire galaxy. The council believed isolation would weaken humanity. They believed cutting humans off from their networks would force submission. They were wrong. Humanity never needed permission to thrive. They never required approval to be free. And they never would. The blockade ended now. Not because the council granted mercy, but because humanity was ending it themselves. To coalition species, humanity stood with them. To independent systems watching, freedom was always an option. To the council, Earth's seat was always empty because humanity chose to stand rather than kneel. The new fleet launched from the ancient shipyard. 60 ships of revolutionary design moved toward the blockade line. The council forces saw them coming and had to choose: escalate to open war or back down. They had wanted to make an example of humanity. Instead, humanity made an example of them. The sight of 60 advanced warships approaching the blockade sent the council fleet into chaos. They were sleek and powerful, radiating energy signatures that spoke of technology far beyond current standards. Admiral Helen Bradford commanded the lead ship and opened a channel to all council vessels. She identified herself and stated that the blockade of human space was over. The council had 2 options: withdraw peacefully or be removed. They had 1 hour to decide. Aboard the council battlecruiser, Commander Vex stared at scanner readouts in disbelief. He asked where these ships came from. The technology should not be possible. His tactical officer was equally stunned. Energy readings suggested power output 40% higher than their best cruisers. The human weapons were charged, and targeting solutions were locked. If they opened fire, the council fleet would not last 10 minutes. Vex opened an emergency channel to the station and requested immediate orders. He explained the humans had deployed a fleet of unknown origin with superior capabilities. On the station, the Council's inner circle held an emergency meeting. Ambassador Vrel was pale, and his earlier confidence had shattered. He said this was impossible. Their intelligence indicated humans had nothing like this. Where did these ships come from? Corin had been quietly gathering information through his own sources. He provided the answer. Corin has not remember. Humans discovered a precursor shipyard in deep space. The technology was older than the Council itself. They had already made it operational. The implications hung in the air, like a death sentence. The Council had based its entire strategy on superior military force. If humanity could produce precursor-level technology, that advantage was gone. Vrel insisted they could not back down. If they withdrew, they would look weak. Every species in the galaxy would see that defying the Council had no consequences. Thera asked quietly what would happen if they fought. If they engaged a fleet they could not defeat, they would look foolish and weak. They were already losing the political battle. A military defeat would end the Council as they knew it. High Chancellor Drex had remained silent until now. He spoke with the weight of his species' long history. He said they had made errors in judgment. They treated humanity as children who needed guidance. But humans were never children. They were always something else. A species that chose freedom over security and risk over comfort. The Council should have recognized that. Vrel demanded to know what Drex was suggesting. Drex replied that he was suggesting they acknowledge reality. The blockade had failed. Continuing it would achieve nothing but their own humiliation. They had to negotiate. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Council would stand down. Vex received his orders with mixed relief and resignation. He opened a channel to Admiral Bradford. He identified himself as commander of the Council blockade fleet. They had received authorization to withdraw. The blockade was lifted. Helen allowed herself a small smile. She acknowledged the message and wished them safe travels. As Council ships began their retreat, the entire galaxy watched. The footage was everywhere. The mighty Galactic Council backing down from a confrontation with humanity. The political shockwaves were immediate and profound. 7 more species formally withdrew from the Council and asked to join the coalition. Another dozen began renegotiating their Council membership terms, demanding real equality instead of junior status. The power structure that had governed the galaxy for 12,000 years was cracking. 3 weeks after the blockade ended, something unprecedented occurred. The Galactic Council formally requested a diplomatic summit with humanity, not to dictate terms, but to negotiate. Paul Wright agreed with one condition. The meeting would take place on neutral ground, and the coalition would have full representation. The summit was held at the same independent station where Lisa had first met Corin. The Council sent 20 representatives. Humanity arrived with 10, and the coalition sent 15 more from various member species. Vrel was not part of the Council delegation. His aggressive approach had been completely discredited. Instead, Corin led the Council's team. A choice that spoke volumes about internal changes within that ancient institution. Corin began by saying they had come to discuss a new framework for galactic relations. The old system was clearly no longer adequate for current realities. Paul said they were listening. 3 weeks of intense negotiations followed. The Council wanted humanity and the coalition to accept some form of oversight. Humanity and the coalition demanded recognition as sovereign equals. Both sides had to compromise. The result was an agreement that would reshape galactic civilization. The Galactic Council would continue to exist, but would be restructured as a federation of equals instead of a hierarchy. All member species would have equal votes. The distinction between senior and junior members would be abolished. The coalition of independent systems would be recognized as a sovereign entity with the same rights as the Council. Both organizations would cooperate on mutual interests, but remain independent. A new category would be created for species wanting some galactic cooperation without full membership. These associated systems would have freedom to participate in joint projects, trade agreements, and security arrangements as they chose. All territorial claims would be renegotiated based on actual occupation rather than historical precedent. No organization could claim authority over neutral space. Technology sharing would be voluntary, not mandatory. Species could keep their innovations private or share them with partners of their choosing. Most significantly, Earth's seat in the council chamber would remain permanently empty. But now, it would be empty by choice and recognized as such. A symbol that membership was an option, not a requirement. As Paul signed the agreement, he reflected on the journey. 30 years ago, humans had been newcomers expected to submit to established order. They refused, and that refusal cost them. It cost them in trade opportunities, diplomatic isolation, and constant pressure. But it also gained them something priceless: freedom. The freedom to explore where they chose, ally with whom they chose, develop their culture without oversight. In fighting for that freedom, they inspired others to want the same. Jacob Hayes attended the signing ceremony and found himself standing next to Elder Mara. She said quietly that humanity had changed the galaxy. The Colleen had been hiding in fear, and humans gave them hope to stand in the light again. Jacob replied that humanity just refused to kneel. It turned out many species were waiting for someone to show them they did not have to. Lisa had a similar conversation with a young scientist named Kira, who had joined Coalition research. Kira said she spent her whole life being told the Council's way was the only way. Without their guidance, civilization would collapse into chaos. But humanity proved that wrong. Different did not mean worse. Independence did not mean isolation. Lisa cautioned that it also did not mean easy. Humanity had to fight for everything they had. Freedom was expensive. Kira said firmly, it was worth it. Always worth it. The ceremony concluded with speeches from various leaders. When Paul's turn came, he kept it brief. He said 30 years ago, humanity was offered a seat at the council table. The price was their sovereignty. They said no. That empty seat became a symbol. To the council, of foolish pride. To humanity, of refusal to trade. Freedom for acceptance. Today that seat was still empty, but it meant something different. It meant galactic civilization had room for more than one path. Cooperation did not require submission. Strength could coexist with freedom. Humanity never begged for acceptance, because acceptance on those terms was worthless. They wanted respect, partnership, equality. They were willing to stand alone. Until they got it. Turns out they did not have to stand alone for long. The galaxy was changing. The old order was giving way to something new and better. Humanity was proud to be part of that change. Not because they were superior, but because they dared to imagine things could be different. Earth's seat was always empty and always would be. Not because they were excluded, but because they chose to forge their own path among the stars. That was what freedom meant. That was what they fought for. That was what they would always defend. The applause came not just from humans and coalition members, but from many council delegates as well. DPR. And when to OT. And when to OT. The old guard might have resisted, but a new generation understood the galaxy Paul described was better than the one they inherited. 3 months after the agreement was signed, Jacob's ship prepared for another deep space mission. He reviewed his crew roster and smiled. Among the 50 people on board were humans and members from multiple species. Even 2 former Council military officers who resigned to join Coalition exploration. Karen observed it was a mixed crew for a mixed mission in a mixed future. She asked if it would work. Jacob replied, it had to. Humanity spent 30 years proving you did not need the Council to survive. Now they had to prove different species could work together as equals, not rulers and subjects. That was the harder part. Karen asked if it was worth trying. Jacob said, always. The ship launched toward unknown space, carrying the hopes of the coalition and the promise of a different kind of civilization. Behind them, Earth's seat remained empty in the council chamber. No longer a symbol of exclusion or defiance, but a reminder there were multiple paths among the stars. Humanity never begged for acceptance. In the end, they did not need to. By standing firm, refusing to compromise their principles, showing others that freedom was possible, they changed the galaxy more effectively than any amount of submission could have. The seat was empty because humanity chose to stand. In standing, they showed others they could stand too. The galaxy would never be the same.